This video is sponsored by ObjectiveMarkers.com. Order now and get a free set of dice with your Objective Marker purchase. More about them later on. What's up, folks? Welcome back to TacticalTortoise. My name is Trevi, and we're back. It's the best armies in Warhammer 40k, the weekly video series, sometimes where we go through undefeated armies from the past weekend. We are back, and with an insane week of Warhammer 40,000 results. This is going to be a rapid-fire episode because we saw multiple major-level events with multiple undefeated, crossing the broad spectrum of the metagame. We're finally out of the doldrums of the Death Guard and Knights-centric metagame of the last month or so, and instead see some wild developments. So let's dive in. Now, I am currently traveling back from the Heart of War GT, which I live streamed over the course of the weekend. We saw some of those insane results come to fruition in person on my live stream. I'll drop a link down in the video description to the stream VODs if you are interested in watching those. And I'll be live for most of weekends of the coming months. So don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to get notified when I go live with new events. I also apologize if my audio sounds bad because I'm recording on my laptop from a hotel room. So there we go. And with that, we'll just hop into a metagame breakdown to talk about what is winning. And we have a brand new frontrider in the metagame, Aeldari, who took down the China Warhammer City, Northeast Open, Liberty Open, Road to Nova, Boise Cup, and GT de Santa Brigada. Death Guard still looking fairly strong, taking down the Village Brawl GT, North and South GT, Welcome Mr. New Iberian Goblin, as well as the RopeCon GT for a total of 4 wins. However, hot on their heels, a new contender, Adepta Sororitas, taking down the Dark Sphere July GT, China Warhammer City, and Waterdeep GT 4th edition. Now from there, we have Astra Militarum with 3 wins at Weekend Wars 7, Red Dragon GT, and W4. World Eaters also coming in strong with 2 undefeated results at the Cross Swords War at the Westward 8, as well as the Boise Cup. Chaos Knights with a couple of undefeated results in some of the previously mentioned events that included the Northeast Open and RopeCon GT, as well as an insane number of factions with a single event win or a single undefeated result. That includes Thousand Suns at China Warhammer City, Chaos Demons at the Northeast Open, Dark Angels at Iron Forged 1, Adeptus Mechanicus at Iron Claws Wargaming South Mills GT, Genestealer Cults at the Fleur de Lis GT, Leagues of Votann at the Liberty Open Road to Nova. Deathwatch took down the Heart of War GT alongside Necrons, coming undefeated at 2nd place. Again, I streamed those results on my live stream, so you can check those out. Drukhari took down Hoghammer 2. Adeptus Custodes had an undefeated result at the Boise Cup. Chaos Space Marines took down the WG July GT. And last, and I don't know, they're all right, Tyranids came in with another undefeated result at the RopeCon GT. So with that, let's dive in and talk about this insane number of lists. It is going to be a rapid fire segment this time around, everybody, just after a word from our sponsors. This video is sponsored by ObjectiveMarkers.com. Now, if you play 40k, you know what an objective marker looks like. They're 7.5-ish inch circles that we use to denote the 40mm objective pucks and their zone of control on the battlefield. And oftentimes, we'll play with neoprene versions, but I have talked about other versions of polymer objective markers in the past, and ObjectiveMarkers.com offers a unique take on this formula. Polymer objective markers have a ton of advantages over the more standard neoprene. They are clear, which allows you to showcase terrain features and battle mats underneath them without disrupting the immersion of the game. ObjectiveMarkers.com offers a wide variety of designs themed to a bunch of different 40k factions that mesh with the battlefield in a way that a garish neoprene objective marker won't. They're also flexible and highly resilient, in addition to being much smaller than a neoprene marker, making them much easier to store. So check them out at ObjectiveMarkers.com. Shop around for a design that matches your faction aesthetic, and I'll see you with them on the battlefield. Now, we're going to start by discussing Aeldari over here at the Northeast Open, one of the largest events of the weekend held in Great Britain, a 104-player major-level event. Now, this event had several undefeated players, including Chaos Demons, Chaos Knights, and, last but certainly not least, Vic VJ on Aeldari. Vic was playing an Aspect Host. We have seen a bit of a resurgence of War Host more recently. Aspect Host has a little bit more consistent damage output, but obviously it trades the maneuverability of War Host. However, you do get a ton of utility as well as the ability to pretty reliably knock down heavy targets with powerful Aspect Warrior units. That includes an Autarch Wayleaper with Strategic Savant, Fuegan, Janezar, Lycus, and Maugan Ra. we're including 2 units of Corsair Void Weavers just as light utility, alongside a single Wave Serpent, a unit of 5 Dark Reapers to attach Maugan Ra into, a Falcon. Now, the Dark Reapers typically will embark into the Falcon. They can use Skyborn Sanctuary to de- and re-embark as they need to. That then gives them the benefit of the Falcon's fire support, so they can gain wound rerolls, which is great for Maugan Ra, who has devastating wounds on his gun, and can potentially deal additional mortal wounds with his explosive effect. So these Dark Reapers are able to hop out of a transport, benefit from the Falcon's wound rerolls, do a bunch of mortal wounds, hop back in the transport, and rinse and repeat as they see fit. And we also then have a unit of 10 Fire Dragons. That's to attach with Fuegan and hop into the Wave Serpent to deliver those guys. A unit of Howling Banshees, a unit of Rangers, a big unit of Swooping Hawks, alongside 2 smaller units of 5 just to act as utility, as well as 3 total units of Warp Spiders. So lots of small, fast units that can continuously prop up the score over the course of the game, while the 2 larger bricks can deal some continuous damage. The Fire Dragons especially are pretty scary. If you are using Skyborn Sanctuary to keep them inside their transports, they can just peek out and essentially obliterate any monster vehicle keyworded thing that's pushing into the center of the table while you're skirmishing around the sides with your smaller Aspect Warrior units. Now with that, we're going to move over to Finland for an absolute mouthful of an event name. Brave New World RopeCon GT. This was a 76-player event and was won by Death Guard, Lasse Toivonen, taking them to an undefeated result. Now, in this case, we were playing Champions of Contagion, which is pretty cool to see, since more recently we have been seeing a little bit of a resurgence of things like Mortarian's Hammer. However, this detachment gives a ton of really powerful effects for your attached unit. Things like bonus toughness and enhanced critical effects to combo with all the powerful critical hits that the faction tends to rely on. This list included Typhus, a Biologus Putrefier with final ingredient to turn on additional contagions for the army after he kills characters, 2 Lords of Contagion, as well as a Malignant Plaguecaster and a Tallyman. We're then following that up with a unit of 10 Plague Marines, attaching the Biologus Putrefier and the Plaguecaster in there for the classic combo of 5+ critical, lethal, and sustained hits. But those guys also having 2 characters attached means they're eligible for things like the Fight First stratagem in the detachment, which can be absolutely brutal if they jump out, kill something with shooting, threaten Overwatch, and a Fight First, meaning that the counterattack into them is very difficult. And even if you shoot them from long range, they can still use plus toughness to bring themselves to toughness 8, which makes a lot of medium infantry sweepers think twice about trying to commit too hard to attack them. From there, we're also running 3 units of Death Shroud Terminators. That includes a unit of 6 as well as 2 units of 3, likely to attach Typhus and the 2 Lords of Contagion. 30 Poxwalkers for utility, a Chaos Rhino to carry around those Plague Marines, alongside an absolute brick of fetid blow drones. 3 heavy Blight Launcher blow drones alongside 2 Myphitic Blight Haulers. Now with that, we're going to move over to another larger GT, the 59-player Dark Sphere July GT. This event was also held in Great Britain and was won by Kian Tan, none other than Ash C from Tweem Uwu over on the TacticalTortoise server. If you play online, you might recognize Kian's name because she plays constantly on Tabletop Simulator and has accepted an invite to my invitational tournament that is beginning this week. So if you stay tuned to the YouTube channel, I'm going to be streaming a lot of games from players like Kian. On top of that, she's not the only T5S2 invitee that we're going to be talking about today, so that's pretty cool. An absolute killer weekend for all of our invited guests. And with that, Kian is playing a Hallowed Martyrs detachment. This is the classic index style detachment where you gain bonuses when your models die and can bring your characters back to life. This includes the Demonifuge, Ephriel Stern, and Kaiganil. Them having a free heroic intervention as well as Deep Strike baked in makes them very good for grabbing units using Suffering and Sacrifice when they weren't necessarily expecting it, and they have good synergy with that combo because the unit has Fights First. So they can do things like Rapid Ingress or set themselves up in a defensive position, heroically intervene into a charging unit, fight first, and then absorb all of that charging unit's attacks onto themselves. If you have the CP floating, you could even Divine Intervene to bring Ephriel Stern back after the unit is killed. From there, we have Judith Iruita to generate some command points. Morven Val, because it's a sisters list, so she's there. We have double Canonesses, one of them with Saintly Example to generate additional Miracle Dice when she dies, both of those equipping Null Rods and Condemner bolt guns. The Null Rod is an interesting piece of technology here because it can protect you from things like Thousand Suns. The Canoness can choose at the start of any phase to give herself a once per game 2+ invulnerable save, making her almost invulnerable to all incoming damage. The way to get around that is Mortal Wounds. The Null Rod protects against both Mortal Wounds and Psychic attacks, meaning that even something like Magnus the Red hitting her with devastating damage could potentially be shrugged off, which is pretty neat technology. From there, we also have a Dialogus and a Palatine with Through Suffering Strength to gain additional damage when she is wounded. We then have a Battle Sister Squad, 2 units of Arcoflagellants. These things get absolutely insanely amped up when you benefit from the Grim Demeanor effect of the Hallowed Martyr's Detachment ability. So once they start losing models, they actually improve their damage output rather than losing it, because each individual model has so many relatively low weapon skill attacks. Getting +1 to hit or even +1 to wound on those things is wild. We then have a unit of 10 Celestian Sacrosancts, a unit of 3 Paragon Warsuits to hang out with Morven Ball, 1 Immolator, 1 Sororitas Rhino, Canis Rex, the great man himself, alongside a Calidus Assassin. As we've talked about before on this series, it is interesting, the Canis Rex being the very interesting points level that the design team has chosen to assign his datasheets. It does buoy up a lot of less played factions. A lot of Imperium factions can actually make use of him at this points level and improve themselves wildly, since Adepta Sororitas have relatively mediocre long-range shooting and anti-armor melee, and Canis Rex can shore up both of those weaknesses, acting as a very powerful late-game piece that doesn't take too much synergy away from the Sororitas units proper. Now with that, we're going to move over to the W4, Western Wisconsin Wargaming Weekend. And this is going to be back-to-back T5S2 invitees because this event was won by Wesley St. Hines, a.k.a. Nemo the Fish. And while I am impressed by Nemo's 5-0 result here, he has unfortunately dropped victory points in this event. He did not score the full 500. Of that, I am disappointed. Now, Nemo is playing a Recon Element Astra Militarum list. This detachment is focused almost entirely on absorbing board control. It grants you the benefit of cover or an armor save bonus if you are benefiting from cover, which can stack together with things like the take cover order from the Militarum army rule to grant its units absolutely insane resilience. When you're talking about hundreds of models that can be down to effectively a 3+ or even in some cases kind of a 2+ save, these guys get insanely difficult to remove at volume. So, what are we taking in this list? This includes Gaunt's Ghosts for some up-down potential. You can also do things like put cavalry units into strategic reserve in this detachment. So, not the only up-down that the list has available, but it is pretty useful. We've Ursula created alongside 3 Cadian Castellans with Scare Gas Grenades. These guys will grant lethal hits to their units, but also, more importantly, the ability to fall back, shoot, and charge, which allows this army to skirmish incredibly well. Even if you charge into it and engage the majority of the army, it's able to fall back potentially through you, take some casualties from Desperate Breakout, then continuously charge into your formation to steal your objectives with high OC units affected by duty and honor. We then have several Cadian command squads, 3 in total. These guys will confer cover to their unit as long as their officer is alive, allowing them to then automatically benefit from the Recon Element Detachment ability for an additional +1 save, putting you to basically a base 3+ armor save if cover is not being ignored from you. We then have a ton of infantry, an absolute metric ton. That includes 4 units of 20 Cadian Shock Troopers for a total of 80 of those to attach things like the Cadian Castellans and the platoon command squads. We then have 3 units of Catagen Jungle Fighters, 10 in each of those, for 30 scouting models. Following that up are the Death Corps of Krieg. That includes 1 brick of 20, as well as maxing the field allowance here with another 5 units of 10, bringing that total up to 70 Death Corps of Krieg. From there, we have several units of Etilin Right Fighters, including 2 units of 10 and 1 Scout Sentinel to fill in the rest, adding a little bit of additional forward operation. Again, those Etilin Rough Riders can go into strategic reserve if they're near a table edge for command points, but they're also good just as a fast unit to deliver high OC to an enemy objective, or as a melee counterpunch if your line does get engaged to the point that you can't really just fight through it. This list is incredible at scoring. That's mostly what it does. It actually doesn't do very much damage whatsoever. It will clip infantry relatively quickly, but it's not the fastest thing in the world. The Aztlan Rough Riders are really the only damage output from the army, and otherwise it's just firing a smattering of special weapons at you. However, many armies do not have the capacity to kill all of the infantry that it's bringing, not including the characters and the command squads. This includes 60 Cadian Shock Troopers, 70 Death Corps of Krieg, and 30 Catachan Jungle Fighters for 160 infantry models, all of them potentially benefiting from that +2-ish save characteristic that you can get yourself down to, which is absolutely wild. The Recon Element Detachment ability even allows you in some situations to just benefit your army with a Duty and Honor for additional OC, or with move to put your OC onto enemy objectives. And that allows you to keep your opponent's score down while scoring insane numbers of points by yourself. And clearly that style of list is incredibly effective. Now with that, we're going to move over to the Boise Cup, a 76-player event being held in Boise, Idaho. That makes sense. This event was won by Ryan Brown playing World Eaters, but that wasn't the only undefeated, and it's not the only list from this event that we'll be talking about. We'll definitely come back and talk about Adeptus Custodes later on. Ryan was playing a Berserker warband. This included a Demon Prince of Khorne with Helm of Brazen Ire to stack his defensive mechanics as hard as he can, Karn the Betrayer, a Master of Executions with the Berserker Glaive, and a second one with Favorite of Khorne to sit in the back and grant the army rerolls on their on their Favorite of Khorne dice. That allows you to more concretely gain benefit from your army ability. In some cases, if you do roll poorly, you can gain only 1 blessing when 2 is the normal number to have access to, and Favorite of Khorne makes that very difficult to flub out. We have 2 units of Khorne Berserkers, that's 1 unit of 10 and 1 unit of 20, alongside a single Chaos Rhino to carry them into the fight. If I had to hazard a guess, we could probably attach Karn the Betrayer as in the unit of 10 inside the Chaos Rhino, obviously. There's the potential that you could put the Berserker Glaive, Master of Executions into the Rhino by himself, just as a second melee option, and then ground pound the other Master of Executions. He needs to be on the battlefield to benefit from a Favorite of Khorne, so you don't necessarily want to put him in a transport. So giving him somewhere to be that doesn't require he be in a transport is important. We then have a bunch of utility, 3 units of Chaos Spawn, as well as a unit of Jackals, and some fighty stuff as well. 2 Forge Fiends with Ectoplasma Cannons, as well as 2 Mauler Fiends for some anti-tank punch. 4 total Demon Engines in this list, making it a pretty wild one. 30 Khorne Berserkers backed up by 4 Demon Engines is pretty spooky, especially with the number of Chaos Spawn that we're ending up including in order to make use of their advance and charge baked in, engage enemies that would be able to kill your Khorne Berserker units, or just score you utility points as the game goes on. Now with that, we are going to return to the Northeast Open 2025 and talk about Ratnu Vaidya's list. Ratnu was playing Chaos Knights to a 5-endo record. Now this was an Infernal Lance. This is the detachment that allows you to perform a Dark Pact of sorts to potentially take damage in response to getting a once per round amp, either to your speed, damage output, or your survivability. This includes a Cerastus Knight Atropos, 2 Knight Despoilers, both of those equipped with Despoiler Gatling Cannons. Oftentimes we are seeing a Thermal Cannon Despoiler taken in this slot, but it is really especially effective inside the Lords of Dread detachment, a little bit less so inside Infernal Lance. However, the high volume of the Despoiler Gatling Cannons do benefit quite a bit from the Ignore Cover that Infernal Lance can get access to, as well as amping their output with things like lethal or sustained hits from the detachment ability, which is pretty sweet. We then also have a Knight Rampager alongside 3 War Dog Carnivores to add a little bit of more utile melee attacks. And speaking of utility, 2 units of Nurglings and 2 Beasts of Nurgle to hold down the board. Interesting to see Infernal Lance getting some work done after we've seen basically just a ton of Lords of Dread more recently, but there is so much power within that Chaos Knights Codex that it makes sense that there would be a little bit of flexibility in their build variety. Now with that, we're going to move over to Shenzhen, China to talk about the China Warhammer City Tournament. This was an 83-player, almost major level tournament, and ended up with a bunch of undefeated, including some cool factions like Adepta Sororitas. Now what I want to talk about today is Ranshin Li and his 1,000 Sons. Ranshin was playing a Grand Covenant detachment. This included a Demon Prince with wings, however no enhancements on that guy, so just acting as a little bit of a beat stick, alongside an Exalted Sorcerer on a disc with Incandium to give him additional Doom Bolts, an Eldritch Vortex of Etoph equipped Infernal Master, alongside an Umbralific Crystal Infernal Mancer for the command phase up-down, Magnus the Red, a standard sorcerer, as well as a Zangor shaman. Following that up, we have a bunch of Rubric Marines to attach those characters into. 3 units of 5 Rubric Marines. Carrying those to the battle is a Chaos Rhino, alongside 2 Mutalith Vortex Beasts, and obviously the ever-present Zangor Enlightened with Fate Caster Greatbows. That gives the army a couple of options for attachments. We could potentially attach the Exalted Disc Sorcerer into one of those to benefit from his lone operative ability, or just use him as a lone caster. Generally speaking, we also see the Zangor Shaman played by himself, although he also could jump into those Zangor Enlightened units as well. But otherwise, we do have the 3 attachments for the 2 Infernal Masters, as well as the Sorcerer to hop into in the form of those Rubric Marines. Now, with that, we're going to backtrack once again and go over to the Northeast Open to talk about Christopher Langton and his Chaos Demons. Christopher was playing a demonic incursion with a bit of a demonic adventuring party, including Be'lakor, a great and clean one with the Endless Gift. Interestingly, Kairos Fateweaver to act as a command point battery. He could generate command points himself for his army, probably getting 3 or 4 of them per game, alongside taxing enemies within 12 inches of their command points. We also have a Lord of Change with the Everstave, as well as Scarbrand. Following that up is a bunch of utility, a unit of Plague Bearers, a unit of Nurglings, as well as 3 units of Fleshhounds to act as uppy downies, and a unit of Seekers for some additional forward operation. It can be screened out by the Nurglings potentially and allow them to make most use of their scout move. The big benefit there is that you can do things like keep enemies from engaging with your guns by screening them out with your scouts and your infiltrators, physically preventing them from getting within 18 inches of the Lords of Change, all the while Be'lakor is preventing enemies from shooting at them. There's also some additional benefit to having things like Kairos Fateweaver in your army. When you're talking about big stompy enemies like Knights, they potentially allow you to engage multiple enemies and then prevent them from using defensive stratagems or things like counter assault by taxing their command points. So Kairos Fateweaver can be useful, although his damage output compared to the other greater demons does leave something to be desired. Now with that, we're moving over to a relatively smaller event in Sweden, the Iron Forged 1 GT, a 32-player event. This one was won by Tim Norden running Dark Angels. Now lists like these seem to pop up occasionally, and I always think they're really cool. This is a Storm Lance Task Force playing a majority Ravenwing units. Now occasionally we do see Dark Angels in Storm Lance Task Force to give permanent advance in charge to things like Deathwing Knights, but today we're just using it to buff our Ravenwing squads. This army includes Azrael as well as Lionel Johnson, the 2 big characters of the chapter. We do have a Combi Weapon Lieutenant to grant Lionel Johnson a permanent, or semi-permanent, I guess, lone operative effect. We have a standard Intercessor squad, which I actually think Azrael's going to be hopping into. I don't believe that we have any other attachment options for him. We have some utility in the form of a Scout squad, as well as a single Invader ATV. And then from there, the rest of the list is Ravenwing. This includes 3 Ravenwing command squads, 3 units of Ravenwing Black Knights. These are 6 Black Knights apiece. Those will obviously have the opportunity to attach together to create units of 9 bikers for a total of 27 bikers. On top of that, we also have another 9 bikers from 3 Outrider squads, giving the army a grand total of 36 bikers, I guess 37 if you include the Invader ATV in there, plus a Ravenwing Darkshroud to grant them stealth. So you can bounce up into a -1 to hit, potentially Armor of Contempted, and 5+ invulnerable save unit. On top of that, they also get Ride Hard, Ride Fast, so they can use a -1 to hit and wound against enemy ranged attacks. These guys are very difficult to kill, and they are incredibly fast, with advance and charge bonuses from their Ravenwing champions, as well as the ability to advance and charge permanently thanks to Stormlands Task Force. This army is ridiculously speedy. It's able to close the distance basically instantaneously with anyone, and if it grants, and once it gets within rapid fire range with all of its plasma weapons, it's often able to deal pretty crippling damage on the way in before it even gets to hit you with its devastating wound, anti-monster, anti-vehicle, potentially lance melee attacks. Very cool to see lists, very cool to see a list like this do well. This is super sick, and definitely a huge gear check if you're not ready for something like this that is as fast and as maneuverable as these Ravenwing Black Knight squads are. The interesting thing about this too is that Stormlands Task Force is not the only detachment this is good in. Wrath of the Rock and Circle of Hunters are both very effective with these style of armies. There are a ton of detachment options out there for you if you are interested in playing Ravenwing focused Archangels. Now with that, we're going to move over to South Mills, North Carolina for the 31-player Iron Claws Wargaming South Mills GT. This was a smaller GT, but it was won by Preston Southen running Adeptus Mechanicus. Now, Preston was playing a Skitarii Hunter cohort, which obviously makes his army significantly more difficult to deal with at range. This included 3 Skitarii Marshals, one of them with Battlesphere Uplink in order to move after shooting, another one with Cantic Thrallnet in order to affect units with both of the Doctrina imperatives. We have a Tech Priest Engine Seer and 2 Techno-Archaeologists to screen out the backline. Following that up, we have a bunch of Skitarii infantry, including 2 units of Skitarii Rangers and 3 units of Skitarii Vanguard. Those are being supported by 2 Scorpius Dune Riders. Obviously, we can use the little fire support combo alongside Battlesphere Uplink to disembark the Dune Rider, make use of its fire support to get wound rerolls. Pretty good for the massive number of special weapons that each of these Skitarii units get, so you can potentially be forcing through things like devastating shots from your arc rifles, potentially. Then Battlesphere Uplink allows the unit to get back into the Scorpius Dune Rider if they need to. Following that up, we also have a unit of 10 Tyraxi Skystalkers alongside 2 units of 5 to act as utility. These guys also work as really, really good roadblocks for a lot of armies. They can be moved through by things like super heavy walkers, but they're very good at screening because they are so fast. They can body block enemies, and they can take up real estate where enemies would want to move. Not to mention the fact that in Skitarii Hunter cohort, a lot of these things are stealth, 5+ invulnerable save, and have multiple wounds, which means that it's actually very difficult to ensure that you kill all 5 models of something like a Skystalker unit before they run off and go complete a secondary. Now, we also have a little bit of counterpunch in a unit of Tyraxi Sterilizers, alongside some forward operation in the form of a Cerberus Raider unit and a unit of Sicarian Infiltrators, and the actual damage from the army is coming from 3 Scorpius Disintegrators. Those are equipped with Ferromite Cannons and Disruptor Missile Launchers. Pretty classic stuff from the Skitarii Hunter cohort. This is actually a list that we have seen, I think, time and time again. Very similar builds have been around for a really long time, but it's been a while since it's seen success. So big congratulations to Preston for taking down an event with this variety of build. Now, with that, we're moving over to the 32-player Fleur de Lis GT being held in St. Louis, Missouri. This event was run by Ryan Verbeck running Genestealer Cults. Ryan was playing a Host of Ascension, and I feel like at this point, I don't know if I necessarily need to explain Host of Ascension. It has a bunch of Benefictus to grant lethal hits to their units, a Primus with Chink of their armor to also grant lethal hits alongside hit rerolls, 2 Reductus Saboteurs, as well as a Nexos for some free stratagems. That's following up a bunch of Acolyte Hybrid units. 1, 2, 3 units of Acolyte Hybrids with auto pistols, alongside 2 units with hand flamers. 4 20-man Neophyte Hybrid bricks to attach those characters into, alongside 3 Achilles Ridge Runners to provide crossfire. 2 units of 5 Athelin Jackals to clear out enemy screens in the early game, alongside some melee from a unit of Hybrid Metamorphs and 2 units of Pure Strain Genestealers. This list has been pretty set in stone for the last, I don't know, honestly, like kind of since the Codex released. But we have been seeing it do relatively well very consistently, although it hasn't changed that much in all that time. Now, with that, we'll move over to South Carolina for the Liberty Open Road to Nova event. This was a 41-player GT and was won by Seth Piper running Aeldari. But we've already talked about Aeldari, so we want to go to the second place placer at 5-0, Ronnie Kinney, who took down all 5 games with Leagues of Votann. Now, I've actually played Ronnie on Tabletop Simulator, and his adage here of both hit, both crit is definitely the case. This list is focused pretty heavily on the conversion beamer weapons that have enhanced critical effect when firing at a longer range. This includes a single Brokir Ironmaster he's going to attach into a big unit of Brokir Thunderkin. We have 2 units of 10 Hearthkid Warriors to break up into smaller units thanks to 2 Sagittors in the army. There is the big unit of 6 Brokir Thunderkin to attach in the Ironmaster, 3 units of Chthonian Berserks, alongside 3 Hecate and Land Fortresses to carry them around, allowing the Chthonian Berserks to act as a bit of a counterpunch to anything trying to kill the Land Fortresses. The Land Fortresses can then play a little standoffish, keep themselves at that 12.1-inch range band so their XP heavy conversion beamers can pop off, get that sick conversion effect for additional sustained D3s on a 4+ to deal absolutely ludicrous multiple damage with those big shots. We're also following that up with 3 units of 3 Hernkin Pioneers for some additional utility and some early game screaming from a unit of Turnkin Jaegers. Now with that, we're going to move over to the Heart of War Road to Nova 40k event. Now this is the event that I am sitting just around the corner from because I was there all weekend live streaming this one. This was a 75 player GT and came down to 2 undefeated players. Both Mark Hurdle and Max Burlov went 5-0 with their respective factions. Firstly, we're going to talk about Mark Hurdle and his Deathwatch. Mark was playing a Black Spear Task Force, and this is a style of list that he is famous for after winning LVO last year, the world's largest Warhammer 40,000 tournament. Mark was playing in this list a Captain in Gravis armor with the Tome of the Exoclades, so he gets a once per game use of double Oaths of Bowman, choosing 2 units to gain rerolls against instead of 1, alongside a Judiciar with Beacon Angelus and a Watchmaster with Thief of Secrets to give himself some damage amps, especially after he kills a unit. Now, the Judiciar is actually a really interesting piece of technology. With the Beacon Angelus, he can Deep Strike and Rapid Ingress for free, and because he's a Judiciar, when he's attached to a unit, he gets Fight First. So, he's going to be able to Rapid Ingress into weird places where your opponent expected to charge, then countercharge, Fight First, and kill them before they're able to come in and deal with the Indomitor kill teams that are actually dealing damage for the army. A weakness of Deathwatch that they often experience is the fact that they don't really do that much in melee. They are very ranged focused, although a lot of their effects require them to get near enemies. And so this Judiciar with his enhancements is actually a incredibly smart pick. Now, following that up, we have 2 units of Deathwatch veterans, one to attach the Judiciar into and one to attach the Watchmaster. That's alongside an Intercessor squad to act as some backline objective hold, an Assault Intercessor squad in order to push forward and score objectives in the early game, some skirmishing from 2 units of Deathwatch Terminators. These guys usually teleported around and tried to deal some damage on round 1 or 2, alongside the actual bulk of the list, 2 units of Indomitor kill teams. For those who don't know, these guys are an interesting mixed arms unit that are able to take a bunch of different Gravis armored infantry. That, most importantly, includes 3 Eradicators alongside 3 Aggressors. They'll gain +2 strength when they charge or when they target the closest enemy unit with their ranged attacks. And because you can extend the range of things like their melta weapons with Kraken rounds, you can actually deep strike these guys using site-to-site teleportation within melta range of a target, gain +2 strength against it, +1 AP, and then absolutely rinse it down. Following that up, they also put out some pretty okay melee damage as well. It's not the greatest thing in the world, just 3 Aggressors and whatever attached characters you have in there, but it's not bad. One of these is going to attach with the Gravis Captain. He gives you the ability to do things like site-to-site teleport for 0 CP, which could target potentially both of the Indomitor kill teams if you wanted to. We also then have 2 Storm Speeders, both a Hammer Strike and a Thunder Strike. Benefits here are that these 2 can combine their powers to make the Indomitor kill teams hit incredibly hard, giving them +1 to wound against monsters and vehicles and ignore cover. So you can potentially be firing with AP 5 ignore cover meltas that are +1 to wound and +2 strength, which will kill most things in the game just right off the bat. The Storm Speeders also Deep Strike, so round 2, oftentimes this army will try to look for avenues where it can lay down withering amounts of firepower into particular targets that it's able to peek lines of sight at, thanks to the flexibility of its Deep Strikes. Now, moving back over, let's talk about our other undefeated player, Max Burlov, who went 5-0 with Necrons. Max was playing a very standard variety of Star Shatter Arsenal, and we actually saw Star Shatter Arsenal do pretty well over the course of the weekend, at least at this event. This included a Catacomb Command Barge with Dread Majesty for the reroll ones, or a Technomancer with Chrono Impedance Fields to make vehicles harder to damage, the Silent King, as well as a bunch of vehicles and stuff, a Canoptic Reanimator, a Canoptic Spider to provide that 6+ Feel No Pain to the vehicles, a unit of Canoptic Wraiths to attach the Technomancer, and a unit of Cryptothralls into to make a big bulwark unit in the center of the battlefield, some utility from a unit of Death Marks, as well as a single Locust Destroyer, 3 Doomsday Arcs, as well as a unit of Ophidian Destroyers, and a Triarch Stalker. Relatively standard stuff from Star Shatter Arsenal. This list has remained largely the same since this detachment came out in the December update. Now, I actually have the majority of both of these players' tournaments on my live stream VODs, either recorded for my YouTube channel member and Patreon games. So if you join my YouTube channel membership, you'll get access to those, but you can also see them in the live stream VODs proper. Again, I'm going to link my live stream down in the video description if you want to watch these lists in action. Now moving on, now moving over to Colorado, let's talk about the 20-player Hoghammer 2 2-day event. This was a smaller event, but it was won by Nicholas Rosasco, running none other than Drukhari. Nicholas was playing the newly improved Reaper's Wager, now giving everything in the army reroll once to hit all the time, as well as an enhanced effect of reroll once to wound if you are currently losing the wager between Drukhari and Harlequin units. This list included an Archon with Webway Walker, 3 Beastmasters to absolutely dominate the middle of the table with a ton of scouting units, Urian Rakarth, the Great Man himself, to hold down some objectives with his respawning body, alongside 1 unit of Capelite Warriors, 1 unit of Rax, a Court of the Archon, a single Chronos to regenerate pain tokens, a unit of 3 Grotesques, 2 units of 5 Mandrakes for utility, and some backline shooting from a Ravager unit, and 2 units of Scourges. We then have 2 units of 2 Talos, as well as some allies from Harlequins, including a Shadow Seer and a player troop. The Shadow Seer obviously makes the player troop harder to shoot at, not being able to be targeted within 18 inches, which means that unit's pretty good coming out of strategic reserve or just hopping around the battlefield, and then closing the distance with advance and charge from the detachment stratagem. Now, as I promised, we're going to return to the Boise Cup to talk about some Adeptus Custodes. Hayden Johnson went 5-0 with the faction, running a Lions of the Emperor build. This included 2 Blade Champions and a Captain in Alaris Terminator armor with the Castellan Axe and Admata Mortis, a classic combination, plus Trajan Valoris for obviously his ability to Gilded Champion his crazy Moment Shackle abilities back into play. We have a unit of 5 Custodian Guard, all of those with spears. If I had to guess, there's a Kyrio Draxus in the bottom. There is, so that we can attach to that unit Sentinel Storm, gain all of her attacks, and shoot them again with full rerolls, wound rerolls anyway. Pretty good stuff, especially if you're getting the +1 to hit and wound from attacking outside of 6 inches of friendlies, because then that unit absolutely pops off. We have a unit of 2 Alaris Custodians alongside a Caladius Grav Tank, 3 units of Custodian Wardens to attach Trajan and the 2 Blade Champions, and some utility from a unit of Witch Seekers. Interesting, we're only running a single Caladius Grav Tank, and instead of focusing more heavily on the kind of hybrid ranged and melee bricks, obviously the Custodian Wardens for a solid front line, and the Custodian Guard for a backline, plus the Alaris Custodians as a deep strike threat. Pretty cool to see a list not running multiple Caladius Grav Tanks. Now, moving back over the pond to the United Kingdom, let's talk about the WG July GT. This was a 24-player smaller event and was won by Samuel Smith running Chaos Space Marines. Samuel was playing Renegade Raiders. This included Cypher, Vashtor the Archifane, the Great Man himself, a Dark Commune alongside a Lord Discordant Hellstalker, that guy with Dreadreaver to give him full rerolls, which actually helps him in a lot of matchups. He's very good into vehicles very often, but because he's a fast unit, he's able to get the benefit of Dreadreaver pretty easily, and then also use those full rerolls to actually inflict damage into other stuff. So things like infantry or monster units that he doesn't normally get all of his buffs against, he's actually still pretty good at dealing damage to. We then have a Traitor Enforcer alongside a Cultist Mob, a unit of 5 Legionaries, a unit of 16 Accursed Cultists to attach that Dark Commune into, and a bunch of Noise Marines, 2 units of 6 of them in particular. Following that up are 2 units of Chaos Bikers for utility, 2 Predator Destructors, a pair of Chaos Rhinos to carry the infantry around into the fight. Those guys also can embark the Noise Marines and then allow the Blastmasters to use their firing deck, potentially granting them sustained hits with the Dark Pacts, which is pretty spicy. We have a little bit of a utility from Chaos Demons, a unit of Nurglings, unlocking a Beast of Nurgle, and then, interestingly, a single Venom Crawler. Now, oftentimes we see this spot being taken up by 1 Forge Fiend, but obviously that dude is significantly more expensive than a Venom Crawler, but the benefit there is that that guy can just staple himself to the back of Vashtor the Archifane, potentially just hiding behind a building while Vashtor wanders around and sits on objectives, gaining Lone Operative from a nearby Demon Engine, which makes him kind of tough to deal with. The +2 strength actually makes the Venom Crawler deal some significant damage into medium targets too. So for just 120 points, you get a pretty reasonable shooting and melee platform. Now, with that, we're going to return for our last list to the RopeCon Grand Tournament. And it is truly a brave new Hive world, because it has been converted to the Hive, because we also saw Tyranids undefeated here. Karle Tukia went 5-0 with the faction, running a very interesting Vanguard Onslaught. Now, we've actually talked about some similar versions of this Vanguard list before. An interesting thing, a bit upgrade, I guess, that Vanguard Onslaught got recently was the release of the hyper-adapted Ravener unit. They are Vanguard invaders, so those guys do gain all the benefits of the Vanguard Onslaught detachment abilities. They're able to advance and charge, and give the detachment something that it didn't really have for a really long time, that being solid anti-tank. Previously, it was mostly reliant on using surprise ambush to get +1 to wound against vehicles to kill them, and while for a while that was relatively consistent, unfortunately, nerfs to the detachment did make that stratagem significantly worse. However, the hyper-adapted Raveners are here to help, because they are going to get anti-monster, anti-vehicle 5-up twin linked attacks. So being able to advance and charge with a really high base movement characteristic, allows you to close the distance quickly, and these guys can actually take chunks out of vehicles, which is something that the detachment struggled with previously. Now, what are we playing exactly? This includes the Death Leaper, 3 Broodlords, alongside 3 units of hyper-adapted Raveners. One of them is going to be equipped with Stalker to give +1 to hit and wound against a single target for the character there. We have a Winged Tyranid Prime plus a Winged Hive Tyrant. Now, we've been able to take some additional units in this list by foregoing the 10-man Genestealers these Broodlords normally have. Instead, putting them into 5-man Genestealer units just to give them devastating from their leadership ability. So, we're able to bring these Broodlords and still threaten with their scout move. However, we're not all in on the Alpha Strike from the Genestealers. If the Broodlord fails and goes down, you're only losing 155 points rather than the over 200 you would be from a full brick of 10 Genestealers plus a Broodlord. From there, we also have a single Biovore, Lictor, and Neurolictor for utility, a unit of 6 melee bioweapon Tyranid warriors, alongside 3 Raveners. Now, whether the Raveners were attaching into the hyper-adapted, I have no idea. They do give each other some pretty powerful effects. You're able to up down the hyper-adapted Raveners, which can be useful, especially if you hold them for rapid ingress to get some weird spots around the battlefield. They also add a bunch of additional attacks to the hyper-adapted Raveners, so they can benefit from their sustained hits and get some work done, although they are lacking that anti-monster, anti-vehicle that the rest of the unit has. Definitely reasonable to keep them by themselves and just use them as annoying utility. They don't have the volume of attacks that they did previously before their re-release. However, they are still 2 damage twin linked, so they're able to punch through medium infantry fairly well. This list is pretty wild. It's basically just ranks and ranks of aggressive melee between the Raveners, hyper-adapted Raveners, starting with the Genestealers, the Broodlords scouting forward and then charging. You're then following up with those Raveners to try to peel the screens away, get the hyper-adapted Raveners into heavier targets, and you follow that up lastly with the melee Tyranid Warrior Brick and the Winged Hive Tyrant to try to close the game out. All of these units hit what feels like above their weight class, in addition to being incredibly fast in this detachment. The biggest downside is that everything in the army basically dies to a stiff freeze almost instantaneously. But if you can keep your opponent off balance and keep them locked into their deployment zone, you might be able to eke out a win. Nice little benefit here, I think, is that going second in Chapter Approved 2025 is incredibly powerful. Vanguard in Onslaught tends to be very good going first because you are able to set the line of engagement on your opponent's deployment zone, essentially, and make the second player really struggle to get meaningful footholds on primary, which could allow you to play a little bit more of a consistent game plan. I wouldn't be shocked to see if more armies that are able to play really aggressively going first actually see some play in order to shore up the weakness of going first in this current format, thanks to the introduction of challenger cards. But with that, those are all of the best armies of Warhammer 40k for this week. Huge thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video. Thanks as well to everybody who supports Tactical Tortoise, whether that's over on Patreon at patreon.com/tacticaltortoise, YouTube channel members, or Twitch subscribers. All you people are amazing. And big, huge shout out to objectivemarkers.com for sponsoring this video. Go check them out on their website. It's objectivemarkers.com. I know I've shocked you with that information, but what is shocking is that they will also give you a free set of dice with every purchase. That's a wild time. So act now to get that offer. Link in the video description. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.